The clock on figuring your life out doesn't start when you're born. A more useful place to start might be when you begin building an independent life. By the end of this, the way you see your own timeline may genuinely change. Let's say, just for perspective, that happens around 21. When you start earning your own money, paying your own expenses, and making real decisions about where you live, how you spend your time, and what you want to do with your life. That's when another phase of your identity begins, discovering who you are, when your life is increasingly yours to shape. And that changes the maths. At 30, you've had about 9 years of independent adult experience. At 35, 14. At 40, 19. 19 years. That's a very different way of looking at 40, because self-knowledge isn't something you can simply think your way into when you're young. Much of it develops through trial and error. You can believe you'd love a particular career, then do it for 5 years and realize you don't. You can chase something for a decade, finally get it, and discover you wanted the feeling it promised, not the thing itself. You can discover that you're exceptionally good at something you never once considered doing for a living. You can love someone deeply at 22, build a life around them, and still discover you were becoming a different person than the one that relationship was built for. You can fail, change direction, try again, become fascinated at 34 by something that meant nothing to you at 24. None of that necessarily means you're lost. It's how you gather information about yourself. And yet, we often call those years wasted. I spent 6 years in the wrong career. I should have known earlier. Everyone else is ahead of me. But how are you supposed to know? Some things can only be learned by living them. You had to discover, I don't want this. I'm good at this. This matters to me, this doesn't. I thought I wanted success, but what I actually wanted was freedom. I thought I wanted security, but what I really missed was creativity. That's not failure. That's data. And data changes the next decision. Time is the vehicle through which you discover yourself. Carl Jung thought about adult development in a way that backs this up. He described the first half of life as largely concerned with establishing ourselves in the world, developing an identity, building relationships, work, competence, and finding our place in society. But in the second half of life, different questions can become more important. Questions of meaning, integration, and becoming more fully ourselves. Jung wasn't saying this happens at exactly 40. 40 isn't a magical psychological deadline. But he recognized something we often forget. Psychological development doesn't end when we become adults. Some of the deepest work of becoming ourselves may happen much later. And neuroscience now backs this up too. A major 2025 Cambridge study scanned more than 4,000 brains from infancy into old age and found that the brain doesn't actually settle into a stable adult pattern until around 32, not 18, not 25, 32. Before that, your brain is still under construction, still building and rewiring the very connections that shape how you think, judge, and process the world. Which means, even biologically, you haven't finished becoming yourself in your 20s. You're still being built. And it's not only the brain. Researchers in Australia recently pulled together data on cognitive ability, emotional intelligence, and personality across thousands of adults. What they found is that overall psychological functioning, the mix of judgment, emotional stability, and executive control that leadership actually depends on, peaks somewhere between 55 and 60, not 25, not 35. 55 to 60. And it's not only leadership. Economists at MIT and the US Census Bureau studied millions of startup founders. The average founder behind the fastest-growing new companies in America started at 45. Founders whose companies were successfully acquired or went public were, on average, even older, 47. So the story we've absorbed, that your sharpest thinking and biggest wins happen young, isn't really what the evidence shows. So perhaps your 20s and 30s don't need to be viewed as the period in which you were supposed to have everything figured out. They can also be years of experimentation, years of gathering evidence, years of learning what fits and what doesn't. Now zoom out and look at the whole lifespan. Imagine, simply for perspective, a life stretching to 85. If something finally clicks for you at 40, that leaves another 45 years. At 45, another 40. Even at 50, that's another 35 years. 35 years is an enormous amount of life. Think about how much can happen in that amount of time. Suddenly, 40 doesn't look like the end of the story, and 45 doesn't look particularly late. The number didn't change. The perspective did. There's a real difference between thinking, I'm 45, it's too late, and thinking, I'm 45. What could I build with the next 30 or 40 years? Same age. Completely different relationship with the future. And this is why the idea of being behind deserves examination. Behind what, exactly? There is no universal schedule against which your life is being graded. Of course, we absorb timelines from our culture, families, friends, and the people around us, and comparison can intensify the feeling. But sometimes you're not comparing yourself to another person at all. You're comparing yourself to the person you thought you would be by now, the career you thought you'd have, the relationship, the money, the confidence, the clarity, the version of yourself you imagined at 18. But that version of you didn't have the information you have now. They couldn't know what you would lose, what you would discover, what you would become good at, what would stop mattering, or what would suddenly matter enormously. So why should the timeline imagined by a younger version of you have authority over the person you've actually become? And there's another trap here. We can hear all of this and simply move the deadline. Fine, I don't have to know at 30, but surely I should know by 40. No, that's the same trap in different clothes. Maybe you find meaningful work at 37, maybe at 46. Maybe something becomes important to you at 58 that made absolutely no sense to you at 38. And even when you do find meaningful work, purpose doesn't necessarily remain fixed. What you want to contribute can evolve because you evolve. So if you're in your 20s and confused, you're gathering data. If you're in your 30s and changing direction, you're gathering better data. If you're 40 and only now starting to understand yourself, you haven't missed your life. And if clarity arrives later than that, you haven't failed some developmental test. Use what the past taught you. Those years gave you something your younger self simply couldn't have had. Evidence. Evidence about what drains you, what animates you, what you're good at, what matters to you, what you're willing to work for, and what kind of contribution makes your life feel meaningful. So instead of asking, why haven't I figured my life out yet? Ask, what has the life I've already lived taught me about the life I want to build next? You don't need to know everything before you begin. You just need enough information to make the next honest choice. Then You learn again, adjust again, become again. And if you reach 40 with real clarity, don't look at the years behind you and call yourself late. Look at what those years taught you. Then look forward. Because 40 years ahead isn't an epilogue. It's a lifetime. Understand your mind. Express your life.